great. Thank you. It is really exciting to be bringing an evening of all Canadian content to the Passive House Accelerator. So thank you for having us here. I'm joining you from Halifax on the beautiful East Coast, but you're going to be seeing projects from 3 very different places in Canada, and going to be talking about resilience and what Passive House means in terms of resilience, and all of the definitions of the term. So naturally environmental, but also economic and social resilience. So the first project that we're going to talk about, or that we're going to hear about, is Nuutsumuut Lelum. And we're going to hear from Mark Ashby, Darcy Imada, and Thomas O'Brien. Mark is the principal of Fold Architecture. He's an architect and certified passive house designer with 19 years experience in British Columbia. And he's also an instructor with Passive House Canada. Darcy is a senior technologist and project manager with DYS Architecture, and she's an intern architect and also a certified passive house designer. And Thomas is the manager of housing and facilities for the Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre. He's responsible for all maintenance and upkeep for the Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre's portfolio, and he's the landlord agent for the Nuutsumuut Lelum property.
Mark, you're muted.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're getting nods. That's great. Hoichka, thank you, Lorrie, for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to present Nuutsumuut Lelum. As mentioned, I'm Mark Ashby. I was the CPHD for this project. Also a member of the education team, along with Lorrie for Passive House Canada. I am joining you today from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nation in beautiful southern Vancouver Island, on whose territory it is my great privilege to live. Today's theme is resilience, and I'm joined today by designer Darcy Imada of DYS Architecture and Thomas O'Brien, the manager of housing and facilities for the NAC, the organization that envisioned and ultimately created this project. They're going to talk about how this certified passive house synthesizes social, cultural, and environmental dimensions in order to help foster a resilient community for the end users, the occupiers of this building. Next slide, please. So very quick overview. This project commenced in 2015. It was occupied in 2018. It was funded by a provincial housing authority as affordable, long-term affordable rental housing, targeting the Indigenous community in Nanaimo. It consists of 25 suites ranging from studio to 3-bedroom in 3 different blocks. And the suites are all ground accessed, which was an important feature for this operator. The costs for this project are actually quite comparable to non-passive house projects also funded by BC Housing at the time. Next slide, please. The site itself, you can see defined by that orange property line. It's a elongated wedge residual from a road modernization project. This aerial photograph is before the modernization. Next slide, please. This shows the road alignment as it currently is. Bowen Road to the south, single family residences to the north, and an environmentally sensitive gully to the east. The site is next to a busy arterial road, but it has very good south solar access, which was quite helpful. And the land was granted by the city of Nanaimo on the condition that this project is passive. The key metrics of the Passive House certification are on the slide. It is a PHI, Certified Passive House Classic project. Stick frame construction, so very conventional construction with exterior insulation and an exterior air barrier. We used Passive House certified vinyl windows with high solar heat gain glass and certified HRVs along with supply air heating in individual suites. I'm now going to pass the mantle over to Thomas O'Brien with the Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre.
It's Quail. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Passive House Canada, Passive House Accelerator, and Passive Buildings Canada. It's Quail, good day. My name is Thomas O'Brien. I'm the manager of housing and facilities for Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre. I would like to recognize the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nation in which we live, work, learn, and play. NAC is grateful to be able to do the work that we do on Nanaimo territory, and for this we say Haitsiapka to Nanaimo. Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre was established on August 8, 2013. Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre is a nonprofit organization whose focus is on education, culture, and family. The NAC logo you see here in the first slide represents a child in the middle of circles of support. These circles of support represent family, community, and culture. Next slide, please. Nuutsumuut Lelum. Here's two pictures of Nuutsumuut Lelum. I'm going to speak to Nuutsumuut Lelum and community needs. As Mark shared, I'm going to touch a bit on it. Nuutsumuut Lelum is a Passivhaus certified 25-unit affordable housing project in Nanaimo. NL is comprised of 4 studio units. These studio units are geared for youth transitioning from care to independent living. There's 6 one-bedroom units. 3 of these one-bedroom units are designated strictly for elders. There's 3 two-bedroom units and 12 3-bedroom units for families. NAC's vision for Nuutsumuut Lelum was to create safe, affordable, and culturally appropriate housing for our urban Indigenous community in Nanaimo, and to build community for those living away from home. Nuutsumuut Lelum, translated from Hulkaminam to English, means all in one house. Nuutsumuut Lelum is intended for Indigenous by Indigenous. We believe this to be critical when providing and operating culturally appropriate housing. Next slide. Here's the amenity room at Nuutsumuut Lelum. The NL amenity room was designed to provide space for the NL community to host family gatherings such as dinners, barbecues, birthday parties, that the community or families within Nuutsumuut Lelum may not otherwise be able to support in their unit. Pre-COVID, Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre would also host gatherings like Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, Easter egg hunts, Halloween celebrations, barbecues, cultural gatherings, activities, bringing the good medicine of drumming, songs, dances, and prayers to the community. Beyond gatherings and activities, NAC would also bring programs onto the property that would include homework club, youth group, coffee talks for parents, youth night on Fridays for youth 12 to 19, as well as educational opportunities for our elders that want to learn to read and write or have support in upgrading a little. Next slide, please. Housing Providers of the Year 2018. NAC was awarded the Housing Provider of the Year award from the BC Nonprofit Housing Association in 2018. We believe in order to be thought of as affordable housing, utility costs need to be considered. You can have affordable rent. For example, at Nuutsumuut Lelum, our 3-bedroom units go for $900 a month. But if your utility costs are sky high, can we really consider it to be affordable? Through its passive house design, Nuutsumuut Lelum is meeting needs of the community as an affordable housing project with low-cost utilities. We are currently working on gathering post-occupancy data to measure project expectations versus real-world outcomes. Many of the conversations I have had with our families, though, and what they've shared in regards to what their utility costs have been, are telling us, without the data, mind you, that we are meeting expectations for low utility costs. Next slide, please. resiliency in Canada. When I think of resiliency in Canada, I cannot help but think of our Indigenous peoples. Throughout history, we have shown time and time again that we are resilient and that we are still here, standing together as one. We are all connected: the trees, the land, the water, the animals, the insects, and us as humans. As Indigenous peoples, we will continue to be strong, courageous, and thoughtful while remaining resilient as we move forward and work to create a sustainable future for our next generations. Through family, community, and culture, Nuutsumuut Lelum has become a living entity. Nuutsumuut Lelum is more than just a housing project. It is a community of youth, elders, and families that together are creating a healthy environment in which they are holding one another up in a good way and being a great example of what can be accomplished when we work together as one. Nuutsumuut Lelum is a good example of a for Indigenous, by Indigenous strategy. One of the intentions of the project, in order to provide culturally appropriate housing for Indigenous, it must be operated by Indigenous. By knowing and understanding the needs, struggles, and successes of our urban Indigenous peoples, we can best plan to provide what's needed, recommend appropriate supports for their struggles, and finally acknowledge and recognize their successes in a culturally appropriate way. A for Indigenous by Indigenous strategy is vital to ensure urban, rural, and northern Indigenous people's needs are being met. Aichka, thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. A little intimidated to go after that wonderful presentation there. Thank you very much. But I guess I will do my best to continue on. I see here that I don't think I got my slides switched like I had asked. Can we just go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is great. So I'll start with a little bit of background on how the project came about as well. So as Mark had said, this was one of 5 sites that was selected by the city of Nanaimo and BC Housing for development of affordable high density housing was the key in that one. And as you can see from the site here and what Mark had mentioned, a long skinny site, so a little challenging with some restrictions on the east side with the Millstone River, and also an archaeological site that we had to make sure we stayed out of with all of our construction work. So the city, once they realized they wanted the site developed, they approached the Nanaimo Aboriginal Centre to see if they'd be interested. And NAC saw the river and the historical significance of the site and thought it would be a perfect fit for their Indigenous community. So from there, knowing that they were more interested in building family housing instead of high density single unit housing, they pitched the Passive House concept to the city. And that's sort of how the ball got rolling on this project and how we started making headway in getting it under construction. So can I switch to the previous slide now, please? Yeah, so a little bit of character and background here. When developing the concept for this, we did gather together with the society, including elders and youth from the society, and a few other key knowledgeable people. And we set out basically 2 fundamental principles that we would work from. And the first one was that the character must be culturally responsive, as Thomas had mentioned. And the second was that the project must reference but not replicate the historical Indigenous structures of the West Coast. So you can see here in this photo, or this slide up on the left, some of the traditional shapes, which were very rectangular, and also depending on the region that they were located in, there were a lot of shed and slope roof forms. They're also very organic in nature, and you can see also there's a very efficient use of materials, so not a lot of waste. We're not decorating these buildings, we're building for a purpose here. And then also with the traditional longhouse layout, a very functional plan, very linear layout with space for individual families, but also a shared central common area for gathering space. So can we go to the third slide now, please? So it was very obvious from that previous slide that you could see just the image emerging from all that sort of fit right in with the passive house concept of simplified building form for efficiency and all that. So we thought we were just moving along great. And now we can see here from a few photos that I'll go over the final project. So this is the main entry into the project from Bowen Road, looking into the outdoor gathering space. And this was, as Thomas had advised, the heart of the community here. And you can see it's flanked on the left by the traditional Nanaimo totem pole. And I think this was, at the time of installation, the tallest totem pole.
Fucking guys, fuck my ass. Fuck my.
Okay, the tallest totem pole on Vancouver Island, I think at 27 feet tall. So I'm not sure if it still is, but it was pretty exciting for the project at the time. On the right-hand side, there was the ceremonial wood portal entry into the interior cultural space. I was going to go over some of the exterior metrics, but I think Mark covered that quite well with the exterior insulation, which was 8 inches of exterior insulation with vertical pressure treated strapping, long screw installation, and the beautiful cedar, natural cedar on the outside here. Also, for you guys' information, the building has continuous insulation around the footings and underneath the slab and on the top of the roof structure. So completely exterior insulated building, which helped us really create these efficient transition details to get a good airtight building. We can go to the next slide, please. So on this slide looking up Bowen Road along the street front of the south side of the building here, you can kind of see the organic nature of the project and the traditional roof forms as they slope up and down. You can also see in the front here, we've got a natural stormwater management system through a rain garden. So we didn't have to use large underground water detention tanks. You can see here as well, since this is the south facing elevation, we've got built-in exterior sunshades. It's actually a little bit hard to see in this photo, but they're there. And then for individual tenants, there are interior blackout drapes for additional control of light into the suite. Next slide, please. So this, you can see some of the great artwork that was incorporated into the building here. When you approach the building from either direction along Bowen Road, the first thing that you will see is a beautiful piece of traditional artwork. And this one on this end of the building is the Métis prairie flower with the traditional colors incorporated. On the other end, it's a woven pattern that is representative of the Métis sash. Here you can see the narrow nature of the building, and it really allowed us to implement some efficient through building ventilation with operable windows on both sides, because the buildings aren't super wide, so it's not the same situation you get with a double loaded corridor. So we really were able to take advantage of that passive ventilation here. We can go to the last slide, please. And here we have the interior gathering space, and there's a couple of really important cultural features that we incorporated into this space. So you can see on the ceiling, there is the exposed cedar slats, and that was actually recycled cedar that we got from a temporary pavilion that was built for Expo 86 actually. And there was some of that siding that was used on the outside of the building as well for some of the fences and patio areas. And so that was really important sustainability feature that was a key element that the society wanted us to start incorporating that kind of stuff. So we were able to do that. And the other great thing in this space is this natural polished, beautiful concrete floor. And that again, sort of brings that grounding sense and that earthen floor of the traditional housing. So that was something that was important as well. So that kind of wraps up my project or my talk here. I just think it's really exciting to see after I think it's 3 years now, the progress and the vibrant community that NAC has been able to create on the site, and just to come and see some of the photos of the events that are going on there and just how prosperous this community has become. It's very rewarding. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you all for that really moving presentation and, sharing such a thoughtful and sensitively designed building. It's really lovely. And I know that there's a lot of questions for you coming up when we get to the Q&A part. But moving on, we're going to hear about the Doig River Cultural Centre from Shona Nelson and Tracy Rockwell, which is another beautiful project. Shona is the band manager for Doig River First Nation. She has over 20 years experience working with or for the Treaty 8 First Nations, and she's committed her career to improving the community's governance and administration for the benefit of the band membership. And Tracy is a senior engineer and project manager with over 20 years experience in small community engineering and project management. And she is passionate about energy efficient housing and community buildings.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Shona Nelson, and thank you for the kind introduction. And I work for Doig River First Nation, who are the First Peoples in Northeast BC with Blueberry River First Nation in the Peace Country. And we're really excited to present today. And thank you to Kim for inviting us to participate with my colleague here, Tracy Rockwell. So if you could see on our first screen, we are actually the most northern passive house building in North America. So it's a really great honor for our community, and they're really excited about it. Doig River is located about 70 kilometers northeast of Fort St. John. Next slide, please. And so this is an architectural rendering of our facility, and we've got some more pictures to look at later on. And so you can see Doig River. We are really in the hotbed of oil and gas and natural resource development in British Columbia. And I think the interesting situations being a First Nation, we always have challenges with energy and getting energy to meet the community's needs in an affordable manner. So the idea of a passive house was really interesting to us because there's actually no natural gas that is available to our community. So our buildings, either the homes or the community administration building or the outbuildings, are heated by propane or electricity or old school wood, firewood. And so it's a big economic leakage for the community. But the facility itself has actually been a project that the community's been interested in doing for a number of years. So next slide, please. Tracy?
Okay, so you'll have noticed in the building that the majority of the windows will be oriented toward the south to take advantage of the solar gain in the low winter sun and minimize heat loss to the north. The end gable has been pulled away from the building, and there's a glass curtain wall there that functions as it brings in a lot of ambient light into whoever's standing on the stage or whoever's speaking on the stage or presenting on the stage. So it creates a really softly lit sanctuary. And the roof slope is been designed to accommodate solar panels on the south side that just fit to the roof, to the clip to the standing metal seams. Next slide. So this is a photo of the north side of the actual building, and you will see the curtain wall there next to the gable end. It was very important. One of the most important features for the building was accessibility. And so both the main floor elevation, the sanctuary floor elevation, which is this elevation, and the lower floor elevation, both are completely accessible for wheelchair. Next slide. So this is the south side of the building, and you'll see the solar panels as well as the large lower floor windows. So the large lower floor windows on the three on the right side are for a daycare, and the two on the left side are for an elders facility. It was purposely designed such that the elders and the youth would have time together to learn language and learn cultural how to live culturally, teach the youngsters how to live with their culture. Shona, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. Yeah, the facility was actually started, we did planning for it back in 2014, 2015. And as part of a lot of grassroots workshops with the band members, they used to have a church and it burnt down in the 90s, and they really indicated that they wanted to have one again, but also we needed a location for the elders to gather, and also early learning programs and daycare. So we decided to consolidate it all into one building when we had the opportunity to do so. And so this is like up top in the community. And the one thing I think we should mention is that in Northeast BC, in particular, Fort St. John area, Peace Country, we have a lot of months of sun. And so hence the solar panels up top. And obviously in the design, that was a consideration. So it is really a multi-use facility. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we really haven't been able to get in there and use it. So everyone's getting really antsy to use it. So hopefully the restrictions will come down soon, and we can have a big open house and have everyone there. Oh, sorry. My apologies. MacBooks. And so yeah, it's a big feature. Our community, our members are very social. We have about 150 members that live in Doig River. And a big thing is intergenerational transmission of culture. And this space will allow us to do that. Tracy?
Next slide, please. Would you like to talk, Shona, to buy Passive House?
Sure. So actually, the city of Fort St. John undertook a really great project in doing a passive house in Fort St. John, and in a lot of our relationships and meetings with the city, we were quite interested in what they were doing. And obviously the big need for our community is some economic resilience, and being able to have high-end buildings that are efficient and that allows us to have some cost efficiency, and in the long months that we have in Northeast BC of winter. And another thing is our community leadership. They're really about being in tune with the environment. They are active land users, and the quality of the facility is important to them, that it's a high-end structure, but also with a lot of natural materials that they could incorporate. And also it's just in line with their values of using solar, and we've been putting solar panels in the community on the homes, and just trying to be aligned with their community values, and appreciating what we have, and using all those resources in not a great destruction to the land, like a small impact. And so solar is really aligned with that. And the passive house concept was very appealing to the community. And they wanted a long-term building. The last major building that they had built at Doig was the band administration office, and that was in 2001. So this is a really a big deal in the community, and we've done a lot of landscaping and outdoor structural work, and we've got buses for the preschool, and everyone's really excited. So it's created a lot of energy and positivity in the community. They are just so looking forward to it. And, you know, when you've got elders pretty excited, it's a good day, and they will be the ones to have their first meeting as in the previous building opening. They always lead the show, and they'll be meeting in their elders lounge, the Dani Chiyu. Next slide.
So we have limited data on this, but right now it's looking like the existing administration building in the very similar area is costing about $50,000 a year for heating. And with the new Passive House community building, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,000 a year for heating. So just a phenomenal difference in price, although that is with limited data. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the sanctuary. So you'll notice the curtain wall at the end that provides the soft lighting around the stage. And the wood slats are acoustical with the acoustical membrane behind that. The building envelope itself is exterior, there's interior and exterior insulation. And I think it's something in the neighborhood of 16 inches thick on the outside. So one of the major building issues was where to find structure, you know, with that much exterior insulation. Next slide. Unless you, Shona, do you want to talk to this?
Sure. So obviously see our instruments there, and I think the lighting up top, I'm sure we could have a rock concert and have Van Halen, you know, be there, and it would be amazing. Even better than the lighting in the Fort St. John, the Northeast Cultural Centre. But a big part of the sanctuary area, it's not just meant for church, but although they like to play music and whatnot, is for the youth to have music lessons, and also the performing arts is a big thing in our community. So you could see there on the stage that with the lighting, they'll be able to do some presentations, concerts, and also, you know, dramatic performances. So, and the light there is just amazing with those we call them curtain walls or something like that on the side there, but they're just so cool, and it's beautiful light in there. It's such a great feeling to be in that building.
Next slide, please. There is a mezzanine in the building, and it's just due to the roof shape, there's the ability to put a mezzanine up there. So it's a viewing area. It's just an extra bonus space, if you will. Next slide. And so the lower floor, Shona, do you want to talk about the daycare?
Sure. So this is the preschool where we'll house our Aboriginal Head Start on Reserve program and after school care programming. So in the back corner there is a nursery room where babies can sleep, and then there's an office, and you'll see there's a door there that's connecting, and that connects over to the elders lounge where they're able to come back and forth in the space. And even the furniture here that we've ordered from Natural Pod is environmentally sustainable and made with very good products. And so yeah, this is just a small snapshot of it, but when I took the photo, the big windows are behind us and they're super thick, and the light comes in, it's just really warm in that building.
Next slide, please. Would you like to talk about the benefits, Shona?
Sure. Well, the obvious one being the low operating costs. It's a very warm and cozy building for heat when you're in there, and the temperature. And I think the lighting alone just gives everyone positive energy. You know, winters get long sometimes and dark. And so when you're in there, it makes everyone feel better, good spirit. And the community for sure is so proud of it. They take great pride in their buildings. And I have to say, working for Doig River, they always like to be number one. They just like to take on innovative projects and take that risk and lead the way in, you know, Treaty 8 territory. And I think that this project itself, being a big one, is really reflective of those values and their willingness to take on new projects with some risk. That's something that's never really been done in our area. And the landscape of just coming into the community now has changed significantly. And it's working for that community and being a part of that community for over 20 years. It's just awesome to see. And I think Tracy could reiterate that. She's been working with Doig for many years.
Yes, I would agree, Shona. Thank you. And next slide, please. I could speak to some of the challenges. So as beautiful and spectacular as the building is, and multi-purpose that it is, and there's just a million benefits, it was not without its challenges. And I think one of the challenges was the contract type. This project ended up being a cost plus contract, which meant a lot of risk for Doig and very little ability to control the project costs. So I would be very cautious about contract type in the future. This is a relatively unfamiliar construction approach, and especially given the very thick building envelope with, with basically insulation on the outside for, several inches. And it created, the local people, the local tradespeople were, I would say they were afraid of this building. We tendered it originally as a CCDC2 contract, which fixed price. And the price came in very high with a lot of risk built in, we felt, due to lack of knowledge. Another issue that we had, and I'd like to speak to that, because I do think that these forums are fantastic, but I would really like to see construction associations being taught and trained and educated on the technology, the physical construction part of building these types of buildings, because right now I do still feel like there's a considerable amount of fear in the industry. We had issues with a non-local contractor and the local contractors in the area wanting to be paid almost instantaneously. Because of the Northeast has got a lot of large industrial projects going on, and the local contractors and local vendors are very sensitive about payment, and they were very unforgiving having a non-local contractor, and yet there was no local contractors interested in the project. And I would say the last thing I would say is the project was very expensive, cost per square foot, very expensive. And I do think there was a lot of learning in there, but I do think a lot of that was tied to the type of contract that it was. Next slide, please. Shona, do you want to talk to this?
Sure. Would we do it all over again? Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing building, and the community's going to use it for a long, long time, and it will offer huge benefits. On a go forward, we would look at different types of contracts, better understanding of the project costs. And I think Tracy really hit on it, the challenge of being in the Northeast. And we already have challenges with competing with oil and gas, and the Site C dam being constructed, getting subcontractors at reasonable prices that would fluctuate and change on us. And that I would agree that there needs to be more training. There's very few people in our area, Northeast, that have a passive house experience or knowledge on it, and education, I think, is critical. But having a local general contractor with some specialized subs ones, I think, to Tracy's point, is very, very well needed. And but we are really happy that it's been completed, and it has been a great learning experience. And I'm really looking forward to being able to track the expenses in and around the energy consumption and use, and what we actually save. So for example, like Tracy had said, in our van administration costs, like we put out about $56,000 last year just in propane costs alone to heat it. And the Passive House building here has already proven to be less in energy costs. But once we get going and it's being used actively, I think we'll be able to get some really good data on it. But I think the project overall is so well aligned with Doig's values and the community. And I think that it's going to be a showpiece. And in Fort St. John, I know our local mayor and council are really excited about it, and everyone likes to come out and check it out. And they're just can't wait for COVID to be over so that they can do so. And But thank you for your time. This has been a great pleasure on behalf of the nation, and I really enjoyed the last presentation. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is just an awesome forum, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you both, Shauna and Tracy. It's just absolutely striking building and an asset to your community. So thank you for sharing. And next we are going to hear from Emma Cubitt and Graham Cubitt about Indwell and Envisage collaborative project. So Emma Cubitt is a principal of Envisage Architects. She specializes in housing, work with nonprofits, and sustainable design. And Graham Cubitt is the Director of Projects and Development with Indwell, a Hamilton, Ontario Christian charity that builds affordable and supportive housing communities. And Graham has overseen the development of over 500 homes with hundreds more in planning and construction. And so they're not sharing just one project, but rather several projects that are passive house, affordable, supportive developments. So I'm looking forward to this one too.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I just wanted to say that not only do we get to work on all these exciting projects together, but for the last year and a half, we've been working in the same house on these exciting projects with all our other teams. So it's been a unique experience. Graham, your mic's not working.
Thanks very much for having us share as part of this discussion. And really the topic of resiliency is obviously top of mind for many of us, both the housing crisis, which is impacting Canada in unprecedented ways with the pandemic, and also obviously the climate crisis and many other things that are happening. So hopefully some of what we can share from our experience is useful for wherever you are. We are trying to share one slideshow. So I'm going to do the first 7 slides, and then I'll hand it over to Emma to talk about many of the architectural things, and then I'll wrap up with a few of the last slides. So thanks for bearing with the back and forth in this.
Graham, your camera's not working too.
My phone's not working.
Oh.
I should say my computer's not working. So I'm logged in with my phone to the audio and my camera to the, let me, if you can hear okay with me not using my headset, I'll just talk through the. Is that working? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry for the confusion there. My technology is intermittent on this computer, unfortunately, just with Zoom, ironically. So very quickly, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Indwell is a vision. Indwell's vision is hope and homes for all. And we were set up in the 1970s to provide a response to homelessness due to deinstitutionalization, which was a provincial policy at the time, people moving out of hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, long-term institutions, and then finding ways to really transform lives through affordable housing with supports. So our tenants pay affordable rents and we deliver supports to them in their homes. We do have about 700 tenants right now in four communities, 4 municipalities in Ontario. And over the last number of years, we have become one of Canada's largest developers of affordable and supportive housing. And indeed, actually, probably Canada's largest developer of passive house standard multi-residential projects. So it's out of that past experience that we really have a vision for growth. The next slide is our mission. We're a Christian charity that creates affordable housing communities for people seeking health, wellness, and belonging. While we are from the Christian tradition, we're open to anyone to be a part of our organization as tenants or otherwise. And so we're really focused on common values of sharing dignity, love, and hope. And we see that each of those is expressed in different ways for each of our tenants as we come alongside them. The next slide is a very quick infographic of the difference that affordability makes. When a tenant has a fixed income in Ontario, if you're on a disability, it's around $1,150. If that has to be stretched to to cover just rent, which is now over $1,000 is the cost of renting a 1-bedroom apartment in most of our communities. You have nothing left for the rest of life. If you can shrink the amount that's cost in rent, then you can actually afford the rest of what you need on a day-to-day basis with a much higher level of resilience. This is the basic economic paradigm that we work with to try to offer affordable housing by cutting down the rent costs for tenants. Utilities obviously are a big factor in a lot of rental situations. And so Passive House was attractive to us in terms of that angle of minimizing utility costs. The next slide is, the next 2 slides are really some of our past experience that got us to where we made the decision to choose Passive House. We'd already been developing new housing. We'd already been choosing to design towards high energy efficiency standards. The picture on the top right was a retrofit building that was 40% better than the Model National Energy Code for buildings. The one on the left was a new construction, and we were trying to do our best on that. The bottom one was a retrofit of an old church hall. And again, trying to take high performance standards, but really recognizing that we were doing our best without a real end goal of a unit per units of energy per square meter or any kind of target like that. So the next slide is a couple other examples. A big part of what we've done is adaptive reuse and renovations or conversions. And so whether it's an old knitting mill factory or old bars and rooming houses, trying to take these buildings and bring them from something which was maybe completely uninhabited, the factory for 20 years, or inhabited but extremely derelict, like the rooming house on the right, trying to bring those buildings into circulation again. And it maybe provides an example for communities across the country for how to utilize old infrastructure in a new way. The one on the right is our first Passive House project as well, using Enerfit. So the next slide, and I'll hand it over to Emma after this one, is that we weren't starting from scratch when it came to designing buildings or working towards energy efficiency, but we realized that with that little graph on the right, many of our buildings were doing pretty good or reasonably good, but in order to dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and dramatically reduce our energy needs, we needed to find a different way of designing buildings, which was why we picked, pursued different options and settled on Passive House. And then, of course, the 5 key principles of Passive House became the areas where we focused a lot of our relearning and team development. So I'll hand it over to Emma there to walk through how each of those became expressed in a number of our projects recently.
Great. So you can go to the next slide. So while Indwell had made this commitment in 2016 to Passive House, it was new to the Hamilton community, to us as designers, and to pretty much anyone we've talked to. And now over the last few years, we've been able to kind of build on that initial commitment to Passive House and try to integrate that into all of our projects really that we do together with Indwell, as well as some of the other affordable housing providers in Hamilton. Similarly, City Housing Hamilton made a similar commitment to Passive House, and I've had several other clients working in the nonprofit world that have all made the same commitment. Kind of around the same time, there's been programs that the CMHC and federal government have created, which are now supporting these projects even more so that we can build more of them. So that's been really exciting to be kind of a part of that wave of the funding that's been possible. So I think I'll show a few projects that we've worked on, but we've built right now about 200 units and of Passive House over multiple projects. And we have 200 more under construction and a few hundred more that are in the different design phases. And they range through all different towns and cities across Southern Ontario. So one of the first things that we learned right away was the importance of thermal bridging. So this is showing some of the different techniques that we've used to resolve that. And I heard one of the projects using the long screw method. For us, on some of the projects, we've been able to get away with just 3 inches of insulation on the outside and 2x6 insulation on the inside, and then using the long screw method. I heard much thicker requirements in more northern communities, which would be really interesting and I'm sure challenging in different ways too. Go to the next slide. Here's just a few more examples of the different types of detailing we do, from the having the exterior waterproofing that would be continuous underneath the footings. Actually, so that's been one of the learnings we've had, is going from where we had raft slabs and continuous insulation all the way around, or where we had footings and insulating around, to doing modeling on each condition to make sure that there was actually value to put into that kind of detailing. So I think as we've gone through each project, we've learned which things are the most important in terms of investing the materials and labor and ultimately the money for that project, and which ones are not as important overall. All right, next slide. Yeah, so similarly, these are just more of the detailings of different projects, how we kind of build up from the foundation. Gosh, it takes a long time to get out of the ground with these projects. I think that's typical, but even more with the type of detailing that we have on the Passive House projects. But once we're out of the ground, then we know we can just kind of blitz through with the structure. Next. Here's a few of the different projects we've worked on. They've ranged from buildings that are mixed use and concrete and steel. Was our second project at 500 James Street in North Hamilton. And we've moved to having a few projects after that were wood construction, as we were trying to use the carbon capture of the wood. Then we did one project that was with the Build Smart system, which is prefab wood panels made in Kansas. They're Passive House certified and were shipped to site. For the last few projects, because of the site conditions or because of the different uses that are in the building, we've moved back to doing core slab and a steel system called Dilt Beam that can reduce our floor-to-floor heights, especially when we have all the ducts going through the corridors. And we kind of created this hybrid where we have the wood and steel structure and then wood on the outside with insulation between the studs and then more insulation on the exterior. That's kind of been our most common go-to for projects recently. Next. Some of those pictures in the last slide, you could see the different thermal breaks that we're using. We've learned to try to simplify the structure as much as we can in terms of how simplifying the form so that we don't have to use as much of the thermal breaks as we try to make this something that could be more replicable. However, we actually have our first project under construction right now, which is a parking garage. And for that, we have the unconditioned space below, and above it, the residential part. So we have like a regular parking garage of structure with the concrete columns, and then right above it, these armatherms that are 2 inches thick. And then that's the break that we need for creating our thermally broken envelope above. So next slide. We have a lot of pictures of examples. Graham created these slides and just put them all in there. Yeah, gosh, I don't even know. So you can just see some of these examples of typical details we've done. We initially had started by doing exterior fiberglass angles to support the windows so that they were within the insulation layer on the exterior. And then we were rolling tape and other membranes all around those fiberglass angles and tying it to the outside. It was very labor intensive, but we at the time thought that was the best thing. Since then, we've moved on to do interior taping of all the windows. So you can see that example on the left. It's actually a beautiful Veta window. And yeah, just taped onto the inside. So that's what we've done going forward. Yeah, don't know what to say about the rest of these. Maybe the next slide. Actually, one of the pictures in the past slide was about on the bottom right, I think, is about the phase where we'll do compartmentalization testing in a range of apartments. And the reason for that being that we've done a mixture of PHI certified projects as well as FIAS. And with the FIAS projects, having compartmentalization testing is an important part of the process. So actually that's been a really useful thing for our contractors and trades to learn, is how to air seal to the extent that we would like them to between units. So because we're not only dealing with kind of the air balancing characteristics, but also we're dealing with things like viruses that we never dealt with before, or bed bugs, or just smells through apartments, and realizing the value of doing proper air sealing is something that will definitely continue on all projects going forward. All right, next slide. Actually, I saw somebody had put up a question about Aeroseal. Oh, Graham answered. Okay, but this is the first project that we're looking at doing it at, which is an old church, which we're going to convert into, I think it's around 40 apartments. But the sanctuary space is going to remain just as it is, as a community space and gathering space for tenants and other people in the community. And in order to maintain the historical integrity of that space, but still improve it as much as we can within the realm of maintaining what's there, we're using the Aeroseal for that. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so these are kind of more examples as we're moving up into the insulation, exterior insulation of the building. We've used different methods of doing that. On some of our first projects, we were using HFO spray foam and clips to secure the cladding. On more recent projects, we've actually, the project on the top left and top right is using green girts, which are like a girt product that's made out of fiberglass, comes from Michigan. Those were really great to work with once we got them here. The picture in the middle is the Build Smart wall system, which is a complete wall panel that includes the stud structure, the insulation, zip board on the outside, and the windows are already installed and air sealed together. That was for our project in Woodstock, Ontario, called Blossom Park, which passed the air tightness testing. We were worried how it would work, but they've had much success in the States as well with that product. Next. Moving on.
Different products. So feel free to zip through the memo.
Sorry. Graham, is my sound not working?
It's back now, Emma.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. Another one of the typical details we have is doing the over insulation on the inside of the windows. But as we've worked on multiple projects now, we have a collection of details of how to do the air sealing around windows and different different junctures. And so it's made it much easier for us as a firm to be able to replicate this kind of detailing project by project. And we just change a few of the different special characteristics on a project, but we get to repeat these details and refine them as we go on. Next slide. Graham, do you want to talk about windows?
Sure, the windows. The windows are an example of where we've done a lot of research about local companies and finally found some companies that are offering windows that are available to Passive House standards made here in Ontario or in Canada. For the first number of projects, we brought windows from other countries in Europe, and it was not easy to work across like multiple time zones, multiple countries, shipping, etc. And also warranty service has been a disaster for some of those products. And so we're happy that we're now able to find products available locally. Next slide. In terms of the HVAC, we've been able to use different techniques and different approaches on different projects. What we've realized though is that heat pumps are key, obviously, to cutting our GHGs and finding that energy efficiency, but it's super easy to overheat buildings. And so you can see that top left picture, we have boilers and a hydronic system, which was way too much for that building. And the challenge is that we don't have enough cooling capacity in the winter for all of the tenants. And so it's not enough cooling capacity. The combination of heating and cooling through the VRFs is a challenge. So we're actually on our next project moving from fully centralized ventilation to a decentralized system per unit. The next slide. Some IR photos of some of the heating. This is in a Passive House building. You can see just the amount of heat coming off of hot water storage tanks or different kinds of pipes. Just the hidden places where you never think about the heat that gets lost in a conventional building suddenly becomes it really matters in these Passive House buildings. The next slide. So the final few slides, we'll just fly through some examples of the projects we've just opened. In 2022, we opened this one, North End Landing, 45 apartments over top of a new church. It's Canada's largest mixed use project. And we're pursuing Passive House International certification. The next slide is McQuestion Loss. We just got certified on this project with FIAS in 2021. It's 50 apartments in a Hamilton Public Library branch on the ground floor. It's really a beautiful building, and we lived in that building ourselves for a little bit of time when the tenant community was moving in. The next slide is actually on that last one. It's also a partnership with the Indigenous Dedwardadesne Aboriginal Health Centre and Native Women's Centre, and 30% of the tenants in that building are Indigenous tenants. In this slide, it's 34 apartments to PHI. We're just pending certification. We think it should come through shortly. It's been a long process that hasn't gone smoothly on the certification, and the learning curve on this project in terms of merging different technologies and such was a challenge. The contractor also overstated their expertise, but they were willing to actually pursue finishing the project, and we were able to get to the end goal of cutting the ribbon together, which was good. The next slide is a project that's under construction, 72 apartments and mixed use. It's got a commercial restaurant in it, offices, and 2 retail spaces. So that one's quite a complex building. It's probably our most expensive per square foot right now. But I think that's due to the complexity rather than the size or the passive houseness, or I should say merging those 3 different things together. That's in London, Ontario. The next one, I think might be the final slide. We have a consensus that there's a housing problem. We have consensus that, well, not necessarily consensus, but we know that there's a climate crisis. How do we make passive house construction broadly applicable? We know that it's feasible. Now the challenge is how to inspire the construction industry really to realize that resiliency matters, and we can achieve success in a lot of these fronts by actually just putting our minds to and our willingness to change how we do things in simple, straightforward ways with materials that are readily available. So how can we, to paraphrase Gandhi, lead the change we want to see. So that's the end of our slides. I think the next one just has our contact details on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Emma and Graham. That was amazing. And now we get to listen to you guys answer the thousands of questions that are scrolling by. But before we get to the Q&A, I just want to note that joining us tonight, we also have Kim Walton, who is the president of Passive Buildings Canada, and she's also the treasurer for Passive House Alberta. And we have Louise Bezerra with Passive House Canada. He's the education manager. And I've seen Louise send a few texts in the chat to suggest courses that people may want to take from Passive House Canada. So if there are any questions about training or about the work that Passive Buildings Canada does, we also have them here that to answer. And on that note, I think Sean is going to decide whose questions get answered.
Let me just get the last couple ones here that I just saw into the queue, and then we'll fire it up. But actually, Kim Walton has the first question. So why don't we bring her on as I'm getting everything organized. Kim, do you remember that question from a few minutes ago? I can pull it up if you need to. All right, well, why don't we, I'm not sure where Kim is, so I'll just go to the next one.
Kim has notoriously bad internet, so.
No, all good.
She's probably talking and just doesn't know.
Were you asking me a question?
Yes, sorry, Kim, you actually had the first question of the evening, yes. And I think Mark answered it, but go ahead and kick it off. And again, thanks for being involved with tonight's event.
I'm not sure if he did. So the question was, I think you had mentioned that it was $195 a square foot for the project in Nanaimo, but the property was donated. And this is the reason I'm asking these questions is because I'm working on a similar project that we just need to figure out how to get the land and how the land works into the overall cost. So I'm guessing that the $195 a square foot is about the building only and maybe the services. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the total construction budget, and Darcy, correct me if I'm wrong, was just under 5.2 million for that project. But those are, the 195, I believe, is just hard costs. And I'm not too sure if that would include the landscape finishes. Darcy, do you know?
I think it would, yeah. I think it did.
All right, Kim, you happy with that info? I think that's going to be a yes, I'm hoping. So let me just put the queue lined up. Okay, so Lo, you have the next question, but we'll hold off on
I didn't hear a word of it.
Well, Kim, you're going to have to wait until a couple of days when we post the video. No, I'll get back to you. I'll answer the question. I'll chat it to you. But Lowell, if you want to come on, you had an earlier question too. We'll hold off on the earth pumps, but Lowell, sure, you did have a question.
Oh God, I think I had a couple. What was the first one? Oh yes, sill flashing. About the windowsills. That apparently was like the best way to. Is that still being practiced? I don't even know this. I want to get that clarified. You know what I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah, Lowell, and this one you were directing to the last group, so maybe Graham or Emma, if you want to talk about those details, so that's where this question came up.
Yeah, I would read about that.
What do you mean, the ceiling from the interior?
No, just the idea of having this pan that has like a dam sloping out. Oh yeah. Is that like standard practice in like more better quality buildings in Canada?
Yeah, so on the last several projects, depending on the window manufacturer and if they can provide that, we've been getting windowsills that are integrated into the windows. so that we don't need to have the contractor try to build those on site, and they're just a little bit more heavy duty.
So
especially our-
that would provide like a window pan maybe? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay. And then my second question, if I, or can I, do I wait? Sorry.
Go quick, go quick.
All right, okay.
We usually stick to one, but
Yeah,
go
I
quick.
just, yeah, I'm just trying to remember so how did you guys, that East Indian engineer that you guys hired, I think from Hamilton, one of the later projects, was it the centralized heat pump system that you had that made it, and then the recirculating kitchen hood, or was it a centralized ERV that made it very efficient in one of the later projects? Can I ask that? Or did I get it right?
This is for the Indwell project still?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So most of our projects had been ERVs, and then with the VRFs for the heating and cooling, and then a centralized ERV begun. However, we are currently in the process of moving away from that, especially because of code changes to the Ontario Building Code, which require more expensive dampers than in the past. So now we are needing to add smoke dampers, which increase the cost of having a centralized system by, I don't know, five to 10,000 per unit. So all of a sudden, it makes a lot more sense to go to individual units. So that's the direction that we're headed for now.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, thanks, Laura. We'll come back to a couple other questions you had. Now that I've got the questions in the queue, just want to let you guys know that I'm sitting in Vancouver, but need to pay respect to the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. So appreciate for that. And also just a shout out to all the design teams and the construction teams that are joining us tonight. I appreciate them answering some of these questions. So shout out to all the hardworking people that have made this, all these projects come together. So moving over to Daniel Clark, had an earlier question for the group. And let me just check to make sure Daniel's with us. Daniel, can you unmute yourself? No, Daniel's left us, so we're gonna move along. Zach Meeker is next.
Hi, yeah.
There you go, Zach.
My question was related to the solar panels, but it was actually answered in the chat. So I think it was 12 kilowatts. So I'm all good. Thank you.
Easy peasy, like them. Okay, moving along. Kevin Brown, I know you had a whole bunch. This is one of your earlier ones, if you remember, or I'll give you an opportunity to ask any of your questions that you fired at the speakers tonight.
Yeah, good question. I have to go way back in the chat. So I'll either catch up later or somebody will get to it. Thanks.
No worries. I will find it for you, Kevin. Hold on one second. I think it's easy. I think it was only on page 1 of 10 of the questions here. Kevin asked, is the space used for spiritual services as a church? And that's again the Doig River facility.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Actually, it's interdenominational, but also the space is organized so that in the culture at Doig River is done as and they are a dreaming tradition. So they have drumming and tea dances. So the space will accommodate that as well. So there's we have some Catholic people in the community, Pentecostal, and also the traditional ones. So they're looking forward to getting married and having a space for funerals and other gatherings and drumming and tea dances as well.
Excellent. It's a lovely space, and looking at it, I'm just going, whoa, the spirit soars. So it's wonderful. Thanks.
Definitely is. Thanks, Kevin. Daniel Clark, another one, he left. So then we have Mel. And again, I apologize if I say any of your names wrong tonight. That's my sorry for the evening, but Mel Orecklin. Mel, are you with us? And again, I didn't check, so double check the crowd tonight. No Mel. So Sarah Phillips. Okay, I saw Sarah. There we are, Sarah. I know you're here. Unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'm not sure what I'm going to get for an image in the background, so I'll keep my camera off for a minute. I'm wondering if you have any advice on doing pre-qualification for passive housing contractors and or architects.
And sorry, Sarah, who's that to? I know this is earlier question, so I'm assuming it's to the earlier group, but just
Yeah, I mean,
clarify who
maybe
you-
Emma or anyone else on the call. You know, I don't know if anyone did a pre-qualification process or if you want to talk about the process at all for engaging someone that, you know, an architect or a designer or a contractor that actually, you know, knew about passive housing, if that's, you know, your end game. I'm from Halton Region in Ontario, and we're just going to be starting some new builds. And I'd like to, you know, just go right to the best and start getting a pre-qualified list. It'll help me more quickly advance my procurement process.
Got it.
And sorry, you're asking about contractors or designers?
So I'm actually doing a pre-qualification right now for passive or LEED certified architects. So I'm wondering, I saw that the training that is offered is for designers or consultants, but I'm thinking I probably need to specify it more as a passive certified architect. I'm assuming that is a thing, or am I really limiting myself if I'm asking for to pre-qualify firms that only have passive certified architects?
So I would say to have somebody on the team that's a Passivhaus certified, what do you call it, professional, to have at least the consultant have that certification. And for the architect, I would say not necessarily, but having experience working on Passivhaus projects or low energy projects. But that's my opinion. What do others think?
Good one. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, if you'd let me for a moment, I'm a past president of the Manitoba Association of Architects and the immediate past president of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. And I'm also the guy that the Trades Institute of Manitoba allowed as an architect to take this first in Manitoba Passive House trades course. So to the point that Shauna and Tracy were making, the reason I infiltrated the trades was precisely to try and deal with some of the issues that we all face, finding knowledgeable contractors who are not afraid of this beast that we call Passive House. And so Louise might want to talk about that later on, but I found it tremendously valuable. It's always been more important to me to be able to speak the language figuratively and literally that is found on the job site, to completely communicate what the intent of the design is, what the expectation is. And if you don't know how to do it yourself, it's very difficult to convince someone else how to do it. So when we go back to the question about Passive House certified architects, to my knowledge in Canada, there's no such thing. There's nothing in the Passive House suite of training options that singles out special beasts like architects as opposed to any other designer. And that's partly because most of the projects until fairly recently for Passive House have been residential in what we in the trade call Part 9 projects. So buildings less than 3 stories or less, 600 square meters or less, that are not complex buildings. Anything beyond that requires an architect. And traditionally, they've not been in the Passive House envelope. So good luck, Sarah, in finding an architect who is certified as Passive House as an architect. You may find some in the roster on the Passive House site, architects who have, for whatever motivation, have taken a design course and have some knowledge. I'm reluctant to call any of us experts. That's being silly. Because I first learned about Passive House without knowing what it was called when I was 4 years old, and my frequently absent parents had let the furnace go out, the old coal fire furnace. And so I discovered that if I took a wool blanket, it had to be a wool blanket so it would breathe and I could breathe, and sit on top of the heat register and wrap that insulation around me, I could capture the residual heat that was coming out of that coal furnace in the basement and stay warm until Dad got home to relight the fire. I didn't know it was Passive House principle then, about wrapping with insulation, about maintaining some permeability of vapor through all of that. But that's exactly what it was.
Sarah, maybe I could offer another point of view. Architects are really good at envisioning the building and the programming and all sorts of amazing things, but you definitely want to have the architect bring on somebody that has Passivhaus design certification and modeling capabilities into the design team, much like you'd have a structural engineer or much like you'd have a mechanical engineer. Often they will be mechanically oriented, but if you're looking for, it would form part of your team, I guess I'd say, your design team.
Excellent. Thank you, Emma and Tracy and Michael, for those comments. I know it looks like Sarah is happy with that answer.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
And Sarah,
by the way, I don't disagree with Tracy. There's no squabble between architects and engineers on this call. She's absolutely right. That's the way it should be done.
Because Michael, just to answer that, it's all about growing the pie, and we all have our slices, and we all got to collaborate and behave. So I completely agree with you. Thank you, Louise, for putting in the chat some links, so people and Zach as well for connecting with the individuals and these smarty pants that many are on the call tonight. And you can always just reach out to Sarah through the chat and be like, I'm certified, I'm qualified, can I be part of your project? So you don't just have to be nearby, you can reach out to her. So the fun things of Zoom. Moving along, we now go to, we're going to pass Kevin, because again, he was in the queue. Patricia Partridge had a question, I think, on wall assemblies. Patricia, you still with us? Just double check.
She mentioned some kind of method that they were able to use, and I didn't catch what she was
Gotcha.
talking.
I think, Emma, you're talking about through your projects, you've used a bunch of different wall assemblies, and I think that's what you were referring to, is just that you have experience building different projects with different wall assemblies. Is that correct, Patricia?
It was a specific something method.
I think if you go back, Emma, to the wall construction where you were doing either long screws, if you want to just quickly just kind of go over again those four different type of wall systems that you've gone through.
Yeah, so this has been our most common wall type that we've used for the last like, I don't know, 6-7 projects, I think. And no matter what the structure is, we've been using this as long as we can have combustible construction. And it's where we have a 2x6 stud wall on the exterior. Sometimes it's structural, but often not. It's just an infill panel. And between that, that insulation. On the warm side of that, we have just drywall with paint as our vapor barrier. And on the cool side, the sheathing, we use a zip board that is air sealed, and that's our air membrane layer that everything gets tied to. And then outside of that, we have a few inches of rigid mineral wool insulation comfort board. And normally it's been 3, we're maybe looking at using 4 or 5 on projects going forward. And then that is fastened with strapping and the long screw method. The screws go all the way into the studs, and then the cladding is attached to the strapping. So the only thermal bridges are those screws. We model the specific properties of those screws. Normally we've been using galvanized, but if we had the money, we would probably use stainless steel.
Yeah, thank you. I always appreciate hearing the details. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And now Patrick Lally. And I think it's Patrick, and I know he's going to beat me up for mispronouncing his name. So.
Oh, no, Sean, that's Parik. I'm sorry, for whatever reason, I didn't actually ask a question, so pass on. Sorry.
Well, thank you for joining us. You always have good questions, so I just assumed you did. Maybe it was just a good comment. So thanks, Parik. Yeah. All right. Okay, we'll go over to Tom Phillips. see Tom here.
Hey, good to
There we
see you
go.
all.
Thanks,
and
Tom.
Thanks for a very timely theme of resilience. And it was great seeing these very community-oriented projects. And it was also very timely because my son had been asking me in a polite way, why aren't sustainable, modern homes built to be more culturally and socially oriented and so on. And so this was a great example to send him to say, here's what Indigenous people are doing to combine all these environmental and social things. So thank you for that. A quick question, mainly for the Hamilton projects about resilience and climate adaptation for future climates. Were the climate vulnerabilities assessed and mitigated, for example, for overheating in wind-driven rain in future climates? Because I didn't see many overhangs or exterior shading.
Tom, I answered some of those questions in the chat already there, but we did look at those for long term because we're signing contracts around the affordability for the long term, maybe 50 years for some of the contracts. So we have to be on the hook for the energy costs, particularly. When it came down to the modeling, a lot of the shading and those kinds of things didn't actually make a difference for our projects because of the combination of mass and the window placements and those sorts of things. So we actually on a few projects realized we could get by without the solar shades and things, which do add quite a lot of thermal bridging. And in the winter time, that was actually going to be a drawback for us. The window quality, the glazing, different factors go into that. But really, we've realized that air conditioning is our #1 challenge. Heating is actually super easy. The buildings don't lose a lot of heat. It's not difficult to create the heat. Summertime heat and humidity is a big issue in Southern Ontario. And so you can't get away from it either. You can't throw a blanket on to get away from the humidity and the heat. And that's where tenants, that's where we really need to make sure we've addressed the heat and the humidity events, which can be months long, weeks long for sure, here in Southern Ontario now. And that probably is only going to get worse with climate change.
So is that,
yeah. I'm sorry.
Is that a new thing to do these long-term energy cost commitments, or is that just kind of the disclosure thing, or what?
For our projects, because we do utilize some government funding for them, it's a part of the government funding commitments that we have to retain. We have to maintain the affordability level for the tenants, the rent levels. And depending on the contract, you have to include utilities, or at least you have to be respectful that tenants have to pay those utilities. And so we can't recoup increased energy costs through the rent. The Supreme Court in Canada just ruled that the federal government is allowed to put a price on carbon. And so we're starting to have climate price or carbon pricing on fossil fuels. So a number of our recent buildings are actually fossil fuel free, all electric. And so in those buildings, we don't want to say bring on climate change, obviously, but bring on carbon pricing, because that won't impact us directly. Whereas, all of our gas-based buildings, it definitely will. And so these buildings are more resilient financially, but also obviously climate friendly in the sense of burning gas to make the problems worse.
Great. Maybe we can talk offline about just the details on how you did the overheating analysis. Is wind-driven rain a current and future problem there?
So I just wanted to speak to a couple of things too. So one being in all of our early projects, when we were developing wall types, we were doing Wookiee models and ensuring that we were going to have safety points in our wall system. So I feel confident in the science of that those walls are going to be good for the long term. And I can't imagine that these building envelopes that are so sealed as these are going to have the same kind of wind-driven rain that poorly detailed projects would have. Hope I'm right. But in terms of overheating, we have been fortunate to not have had any projects that have had overheating problems, because I know that other projects have. And one reason probably being that because of the Southern Ontario climate we're in, Indwell had committed to having some form of air conditioning on all of these projects. I think all the affordable housing projects I work on have done that, either because it's essential now, which it really is, or in the future. But our first project was a true passive house HVAC model where we had the heating and cooling all provided through the ERV, centralized. So there was nothing else besides that. And we had it so that it could kind of ramp up to have extra airflow in the summer for the conditioning. And then we crossed our fingers because we knew that the capacity of the cooling wasn't up to typical ASHRAE standards, I guess we would say. And the first summer, as the building was kind of still balancing itself out, it was hotter than we maybe would have wanted it to be. Some of the units were like 24, 25 degrees. But since then, the systems have balanced out better, and the building's working a lot better. Since then, we moved to having a bit more robust cooling for apartments, and now we do separating the cooling from the fresh air.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, and if you recall, in BC, we had a passive house early on that had a kind of just everything came together, and we all learned about 1985 data, and now we're looking at future weather data. So luckily, again, this community is about collaboration where we come together and discuss things and learn and share and don't make those mistakes anymore. So it's great. So again, thanks to everyone coming tonight and sharing the lessons learned. Thanks, Tom. And now we are moving over to Kevin Brower. I believe Kevin is still with us. Kevin, you want to unmute? Give Kevin another second here. Otherwise, we'll move on to Anna Wynn. Anna, you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you.
There.
Yeah, well done for pronouncing my name correctly. Good.
Oh, I tried.
Yeah, my question got answered actually though. It was about wood fiber insulation. And I was wondering like how you've without using that, because I've just moved from Scotland, and that's what we would use extensively. And it's still a bit more pricey than usual, and it still generally comes from like Denmark or somewhere across the water. But you got, the timber industry in Canada, I'm really surprised it's not being utilised. And I'm also wondering how you're managing to keep the carbon footprint low by using plastic-based materials.
Who wants to tackle that one? Go ahead, Graham. You put your hand up first.
That's our next frontier. Really, in an urban environment, many of our buildings have had to have like non-combustible materials, and we've been able to do our best on very, infill urban sites to use, to bring the passive house approach into people's awareness, getting building departments on board with taking this approach. So are they perfect for embodied carbon? No. Are they familiar to the trades? Yes. Are they readily available materials? Yes. The issues of like picking between materials though has become something we've been thinking about since the beginning. The spray foams that we used, we were faced with two options. One had a global warming potential of like 1,000 times carbon dioxide, and then there was a newish product made locally in Brantford that had the GHG equivalence of 1, or global warming potential of 1. So for the $7,800 price premium, we picked the one that was equivalent to carbon dioxide versus the one that was 1,000 times worse. So on those things where we've had to make decisions, we've tried always to pick the material that had the lower embodied carbon. But now as we move with some experience into more and more ways to assess that, how do we bring wood into projects? How do we use more materials or even less materials so that we have less impact on carbon emissions or embodied carbon? That's an ongoing discussion internally. We do face real tension, especially with the lumber prices these days, and the trade familiarity to get people. You might save money and save carbon, but then nobody wants to install it. And this is the tension we're living in of projects that have to be delivered on certain timelines, and to combine that with the learning. So we're open and very keen to be a part of those discussions, but hopefully can learn from others as well along the way about ways to reduce our carbon,
Or
our
things
embodied
like
carbon.
the insurance agency steering these decisions too, which is disgusting. But builders risk insurance for wood construction on these scale of projects is astronomical compared to when we use non-combustible structure. So that's been a factor in some of our decision making, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it's good. Good to have that conversation and understanding of where you're at with it. It's good. Thank you.
And Anna, if you're not familiar with the updated Passive House Accelerator website, I definitely want you to go check it out, because the first image has passive house, low embodied carbon materials, electrification, renewable energy equals 0 carbon. So it's just a great image that Zach created, and I always have to give him props when I get an opportunity to. So moving along, Michael Lind. Sorry, I didn't check to see if Michael was still here. Got carried away with the dialogue, so apologize. Michael Lind, I see you're still here. Do you want to come on? If not, we'll move over to Ellen. Ellen.
Hi.
There we
Can
are.
you hear
Great.
me?
Yes.
Yeah, the question I had, and I think I was looking at the slides that Emma was showing earlier, and I noticed that all the strapping on top of the rock wool board is horizontal, so that makes vertical siding. What about the rain screen layer? Does this horizontal strapping not get wet? And I know that the rock wool drains and dries out efficiently, but does the wood if it gets wet? And does it have to be pressure treated? Should you be doing double strapping, vertical and then horizontal? I mean, especially if you're not dealing with the super thick thicknesses that you are. Let's say you're dealing with 2.5 inches.
Ellen, before we get the presenter stats, where are you from? Because I know this question's a bit.
I'm from nowhere, actually. Nowhere where Passive House is too well known. I'm in Grafton, Ontario. It's about an hour and 15 minutes east of Toronto.
No,
Northumberland County. Yeah.
Gotcha. Just because, Ellen, in BC, or especially in Vancouver in the wet coast, you definitely need to be having your rain screen running vertically, but in other municipalities you can do horizontal because of the material. And then depending on your rate, you could be putting in some shims behind it so that the water can go between. It just depends on your style and the climate detail. But I'm not the one answering questions. Who wants to answer that question?
So I can answer. I think that particular photo you're looking at was a building that had vertical corrugated metal siding on the outside.
Oh, so that, yeah.
Yeah, so it did have a drainage layer.
Right, in the front. But what was it, pressure treated strapping, or?
I think so.
Okay. Okay.
No, Graham says no.
Not in Ontario typically. You might see that in BC.
Yeah,
but
not on that one. We didn't. Where the steel was vertical, the horizontal strapping, but where there was hardy board, where there was like larger gaps.
Yeah.
Then it actually had the double strapping, so that there was the true drainage layer.
So then if you're gonna do like actual wood boarded batten, you would recommend vertical and then horizontal.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's just, because we didn't see the finished building. All I saw was, I didn't realize it was metal outside, and that would.
Yeah. Yeah. That was like a shipping container look. So we had the vertical.
Oh, nice.
And Greg is here. He's our guru.
There he is, Greg. Thanks for answering the question, Greg.
Hey, no problem. I was just going to jump in and say that on that shot that Emma had showed, we tried every type of strapping we could buy. And the conclusion that we reached is that we decided to go with 3/4 inch pressure treat plywood. And we thought that'd be a lot of labor having someone rip it down on site, but it turned out that the lumber yard can do it in their massive saw before they ship it to site for the same cost. And what that avoided was a whole bunch of splitting wood as it dried over time in the sun.
Right.
And it just created a much more secure connection.
Really stable.
Thanks for that clarification, Greg. 'Cause I think I was remembering the mock-up, which was just strapping.
Well, there was a lot of mock-ups, that's for sure.
Yeah, I actually did have a client do the 2 strappings with ripping plywood, but it wasn't pressure treated at that time. And he was the builder, so that was. We didn't have that big insulation layers. Anyway, thank you very much for answering that.
Sure. Yeah. The other thing we've learned on these projects is that it is helpful to have a more dense, if you're using the mineral wool panel on the outside, to have it be more dense. So
then the comfort board 80, like
so we're using 110 on these
110. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The 110, so it wouldn't crush so much.
Yeah. We had another project where they had to do a ton of shims, and it was a lot of work. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. That would be pretty. I don't think the builder is going to be up to that kind of minute detail.
And labor.
Yeah, he's already balking at everything right now. So thank you so much.
Ellen, you just got to make sure he takes one of the Passivhaus tradesperson course that either the George Brown College or one of the Passive House Canada put out there, so that, and you know what, put it in the script saying you don't get the job unless you take the course.
I haven't found a builder yet. I think in this region, I don't know what it is. They're not progressive. They don't think environmentally, or they're just making so much money doing the code minimum that they're just not. You can't carrot dangle anything. They're just not interested.
Ellen, definitely look for one of the builders, and I'll give you a name of one in the chat here, because
okay, thanks. Thank
it's all about sharing here. Sharing is caring. Thanks, Ellen.
Okay, thanks so much.
We're actually almost getting to the end here. I'm going to go with Sarah Phillips again, because you actually asked your earlier question. I don't know if you had another one from earlier that you wanted to ask. So Sarah, if you wanted to come back on, I know you have a fancy background you're hiding, but if you have a question, I'll let you come back on. If not, I know Kevin Brown had a couple more. Kevin, did you get all yours answered? Lowell,
No,
I know I
think
see you.
I'm
You're
good,
next.
Unless there was a.
There's just an earlier one that I can't. Let me go back up. But if you're happy, we'll keep going, because we're almost getting to the top of the hour here too. So if you're happy, we'll keep going. Kevin, did you have any more questions? Are you happy?
Is that Kevin Brennan or Kevin Brown?
No, Kevin Brown. Sorry, I might have had a internet blur, but any more questions for you, sir?
I actually, you know what? People got back to me in the chat, and I think I'm good.
Okay.
Right. Emma, how are build costs compared to standard apartments in the Hamilton region?
Hard question to answer, because it's constantly changing, right? So what are you comparing to? Especially like escalation in Hamilton the last 2 years has been hovering around 10%, right? So that's way more than a passive house premium would be, just year after year, depending on what kind of materials and stuff. But we did have a study that was done by Enercan that was looking at our first passive house project and comparing it. We had the cost consultant that compared it to what would be similar construction, but not to passive house standard, just the same kind of level of quality. And the premium was around 4%, is what they were finding. So I would say that it's probably something like that.
It's also hard to compare, because the only other typology or material that's being built in Ontario, or at least this part of Hamilton, is tilt up like total precast concrete systems. Yeah. So I can't actually even believe that those pass the basic code requirements for energy efficiency. I don't know how they actually are getting them through, but that has basically cornered the market. So it's a little bit hard to compare these systems to those. That's total
also not cheap. So yeah, I would say it's pretty comparable.
We can always have lots of fun talking about costs. It's one question that, always stirs the pot. So Lowell, it is your turn.
Thanks. Okay. So I got the long question, which is not related. If I can ask that second, and then my first question is just a design question about the, I always wondered about when you have the spaced out slats above the ceiling on the first project there. Would it be a smart vapor barrier that would be exposed, and then they would just like put like black felt paper over it? Is that what they would do?
Actually, are you talking about the amenity space on the first project? Yeah, so that's actually all interior inside all of the membranes. So that's just the back structure is painted black and those slats are just mounted right to the roof joists, because the membranes are all on the top of the plywood sheeting that was on the roof.
There's like drywall of plywood above the slats. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think it's literally just mounted right on the joists, the roof joists, and then they were just painted black. The back.
Oh, so there's no continuous covering for the insulation or the vapor barrier above? Is that what you mean?
No, the vapor barrier is on the top of the roof sheeting. So the vapor barrier is on the outside of
is that right? Oh, I see.
of the structure.
Oh, yeah. So the joists are actually exposed, sort of.
Yeah.
The rafters. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see. So can I go with my
Keep going, Lowell.
All right. Thanks.
Keep going.
Sean, man, you guys are great. And Zach, thanks for the reminder email. I appreciate that. Okay. Yes. So I'm a sole proprietor architect. I do some very small dinky jobs in Toronto by myself for about 17 years. But I'm connected to all these climate change and environmental groups in the Toronto area. There's one called Ontario Clean Air Alliance. I've been going to their meetings. I've learned that the nuclear power plant is the second oldest plant in the world. That was a couple of years ago, and they're confirming that it was due for shutdown in 2018, and they've extended it once, and they want to extend it again. So these people, this group, nonprofit group, is like, no, we don't want to do this. We want to follow Germany and the other advanced European countries, not continue with nuclear. They don't even want, but it's due for refurbishment. So I'm pretty sure that they're ramping it down, and in the imminent future. And my concern is, I'm in the suburbs of Toronto, with I guess the Chinese community, and some of these friends, my family friends, would live in 5,000 square foot homes. That has a break veneer, 1 inch air space with convection current, right? And fiberglass filled houses. So I'm trying to talk to these cultural groups and like media. Do we need to worry about this? But they're not responding to any of my calls or my emails, and along with other urban agriculture initiatives that I've been trying to promote in the suburbs. So it's just frustrating. But I have reached out to Mr. Adam Cohn of Passive Buildings Canada about the idea of using earthen tubes, which I read in Green Building Advisor. This Passive House, I think you guys would know, in the Montreal community, is it Malcolm Isaac?
Yeah.
Who wrote a great article. He used like 4 inch, and according to him, only 100 foot. So my idea is, when I heard when Texas had this power outage, as you know, CNN Online had this article about, the residents in some of the suburbs area are taking down the suburban backyard fences as firewood. So imagine that would happen. And then you have earthen tubes connecting all the detached houses. That would easily reach 100. My question is radon, and you guys are the panel of experts. So I want to get support and like feedback. That's what I'm asking. And is radon an issue? It shouldn't be, right? It's only, it only has to be 6 foot. It is? Okay.
It is.
All right.
So to answer your question, the best thing that any of these retrofits can do is to get one of these excellent Passive House consultants, designers on board, do a model, and then figure out your strategy, because retrofits are tricky subjects. And again, we had a retrofit summit a few weeks ago, and there's lots of good info within the accelerator, as well as with Passive Canada, on dealing with these things.
And I'm dying to ask this. Sorry,
go for it.
So when they do the blower door test, can they measure that slow leak in these existing fiberglass filled convection 1 inch space with the weep holes? Is that measurable, or is that like just a constant leaking air?
No,
Because
it is Lowell. And so before you do your retrofit, you would do a blower test just to gauge how leaky that building is. And then you can evaluate by, you know, sealing certain things off to see what the envelope is, and then figure out a plan to then tackle the envelope, strip it down to whatever you need to, and then put on apply the 5 Passivhaus principles, which Lowell, if you haven't learned yet, you ready to go through it? Add your insulation, air barrier, continuous air barrier, high performance windows. The sweater should take care of the thermal bridging, and add your fresh air ventilation. So if you apply those 5 to it, then you're good.
And you have to do that at the sheathing. You can't do that outside, right? Because
it depends on the wall. This is the best Passivhaus answer you'll get tonight. Is it depends.
Depends, yeah. I do have one little tidbit of encouragement though, Lowell, is that actually Greg and I are working on another project with a really large, biggest project, Passivhaus project I've worked on so far, which is for Munchum, for the, they do long-term cares, and this is a seniors housing in Stouffville.
So that's a new one they're building,
Yeah, and so we're working on that together. And as a Chinese, you know, affordable and long-term care provider, they're very committed to getting energy to net zero ready. Yeah, and we're following all the Passivhaus principles in the design. So
I talked to the guys in Richmond Hill that runs because my mom lives there in the Richmond Hill, and like they don't talk to me. They don't return my emails.
Yeah, well, they're very busy because they're building a lot of seniors housing.
But I just want to. But I cannot imagine that a fiberglass filled stud backup. It's got to be worse than a traditional double wide masonry wall with thermal mass. It's got to be, right. That's got to be worse. No.
Well, what do you class as worse? It's definitely not code built. It's everything involved.
So leaky, so air leaky. No, it has no thermal mass.
Lowell, someone put a good reference for you in the chat. Trevor Butler is an expert in earth tubes, because the Passivhaus preschool in Penticton, they used an earth tube in their Passivhaus project. So there's definitely some examples out there that you can check out and connect. And again, Trevor's an expert in that stuff. So
and I will put the link. And the Fair Company's videographer lady, you see the Wallapini, the one in Nebraska that could grow oranges. I'll post the link. Don't worry.
Perfect. Well, I think that is it for questions, folks. Did I miss anybody? If I did, raise a hand or come on in. I know there's a few people that have come and gone, but I think that is it. Zach, is there any other?
I think let's move to Lorrie, and then I can wrap it up.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. That was as great a discussion as I was expecting it to be. I want to thank all of our teams, Mark and Darcy and Thomas, and Shauna and Tracy, and Emma and Graham for sharing their inspiring and revolutionary projects. It's great.